What's up, patients, and welcome to another episode of the Doc Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Nick, and today we'll be talking about a mysterious form of currency called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the world's foremost form of cryptocurrency, which is internet-based money that uses cryptography. What cryptography means is that you're hiding information behind complex math to make sure that each and every Bitcoin is coded uniquely. Bitcoin allows for instantaneous transactions without regulation by financial institutions. One Bitcoin is currently valued at $1,275, although by the time this video hits your screens, I'm willing to bet the value has changed. The Bitcoin network is public and available in one digital ledger, which is distributed throughout the network. This ledger is known as the blockchain. We will discuss this blockchain aspect later when we consult with some experts in the field. However, the gist of it is that when there is a group of computers on a network known as a blockchain, and they all agree at a specific date and time that a certain number corresponds to a Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is in existence. So, how do you earn Benjamins in Bitcoin? Well, everyone has an equal opportunity to earn a Bitcoin. If you have the know-how, you can create a numeric code which directly corresponds with an unused Bitcoin. This process is known as mining.
Greetings, patients. Doc Hak here, just butting in for a second to talk to you more in depth about Bitcoin mining. Basically, since everyone in this network of computers is part of this quote-unquote Bitcoin bank, people in the community have to make sure the network is secure. Bitcoin mining is the process of adding transaction records to Bitcoin's public ledger of past transactions, which confirms transactions to the rest of the network as having taken place. Now, I recently had the opportunity to try Bitcoin mining myself. If you're curious about how much Bitcoin I made and how to try it yourself, click on this separate Docs tutorial video that goes through the step-by-step process of how to mine a Bitcoin. Happy mining.
So one of the main reasons why inflation happens in the world is when governments print too much money. That could never happen with Bitcoin because the entire network has decided that 21 million Bitcoin will be in existence. If the network decided to increase that number, they could. However, they would never do that because that would decrease the value of their ownership of Bitcoin. So, what are the downsides to Bitcoin? Well, for one thing, you can't get liability protection for Bitcoin use. If your wallet or Bitcoin fund is hacked, you're out of luck. Other downsides to Bitcoin are that the public are having a hard time grasping the concept of it and therefore don't trust it. And also, the reputation has garnered from Mt. Gox and Silk Road, which we'll discuss later. Our lovely field host, Jennifer Leone, recently had a chance to interview people on the street to see what their perception is about Bitcoin. Let's see what they had to say.
I was just wondering if you know what Bitcoin is. Have you guys heard of Bitcoin? I want to know if you know about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, I believe so. It's
I've heard of it, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Yes. Of course. Yes.
Of course. You say of course. Do you know people who use it?
Yes.
Really?
I've heard about it actually.
What have you heard about it though?
Bitcoin, it's currency, but it's on through internet, right?
Isn't Bitcoin kind of like undercover money online?
A buddy of mine actually only uses Bitcoin. I don't necessarily never understood why. I know it's always an option when I'm trying to check out something online.
I'm mind blown that you two are yeah, of course. Everyone uses it. Where do your friends live? I want to know more.
Well, this is LA. I'm from LA. Everybody I know is in LA. So it's mostly an online thing. It's just an exchange that kind of creates a little more security. And I think that it's going to be the future of exchange. Yeah,
I've noticed people on Craigslist saying things Bitcoin, just, only because for my safety, you know what I mean? So that way I know that I'm going to get my money, etc.
Do you think that you'd be interested in getting Bitcoin?
Yes, but I don't know what the purpose would be for.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what it could get me.
Would you two use it? Actually?
If I understood it more,
okay.
You know what I mean? It's kind of confusing. It's not obviously I know cash, I know, you know what I mean? I know those numbers. I know I don't have to divide things up or track, you know what I mean? But if I got a good understanding of it, I'm sure I'd be much more likely to use it.
Do you think that it would be big in the future?
Bitcoin, it possibly can, yeah. Because, I use PayPal and all that.
I don't ever see Bitcoin ever becoming mainstream. Personally, I think it's meant for underground exchange. The reason why it is underground, if it were to go mainstream, then what makes it underground? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
I don't think that
I agree.
I don't think you're gonna be using Bitcoin at Red Lobster. I don't see that happening. It's pointless. You know,
Yeah, I'm with
there's
you
a
on that.
reason why there's a secrecy to it.
What do you think could go wrong with something like this?
Since it is online, there's hackers, of course. So since it's never really been tested, banks have been around for so long and they are safe.
Right.
So maybe online it wouldn't be as safe.
Would you still do Bitcoin? Just cutting out the banks so that there wouldn't be any bank fees or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just because it'd be easier because everyone has access to internet, and if you're not around a bank, then it's a little more convenient. But yeah, I would use it.
We recently consulted with some experts on Bitcoin. Let's see what they had to say. These are members of the Bitcoin Los Angeles group, enthusiasts and entrepreneurs and experts, if you will. Let's get started. How about Lewis? Why don't you tell us what your point of view is as being the programmer?
Well, Bitcoin is pretty unique in that up until now, all currencies have been regulated by somebody. You know, they're regulated by a government or regulated by a bank. This is the first one that's regulated by nobody. The way that a Bitcoin works is in order to create one, you have to guess a series of random numbers, essentially, that go into an algorithm, and if they come out the right way, they become a Bitcoin. The blockchain is the list of all of these Bitcoins that have been found so far. So there's all these computers around the world that are tracking this. And when you find one of these, you announce it essentially to the network. And once all of the other computers around acknowledge that you found it, it becomes a Bitcoin, and you get that Bitcoin. Even if you were to hack one of these computers, or 10% of these computers, or even a lot of these computers, if you couldn't hack the majority of them, which chances are you can't, you're never going to be able to break this blockchain protocol.
General consensus that this is what it is.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly. I hear it's actually pretty popular in China. One of the reasons Bitcoins are so popular in China right now is because the government controls the currency. So they have a bunch of these big warehouses full of machines mining Bitcoins in China.
How much is a Bitcoin worth now if you were to find one?
Well, it was when I was mining them, they were worth about 2 cents, I want to say. I held on to it for a couple of years and made $10.
Okay.
But now they're around $1,000 a piece.
Interesting. I heard you bought 800 Bitcoins back then.
For a couple cents, and I sold them for close to $1. So yeah, I made a nice little healthy profit.
So how much is a Bitcoin worth now? Is it $1,040?
Why don't you not remind me about that?
Matthew, let's go to your experience.
I do some programming, web developer, I do
Okay.
front-end development stuff.
Okay.
I initially got interested in Bitcoin in 2011 and was really interested in it being sort of like a store of value. And what really caught my attention was some of the similarities that Bitcoin has to gold. At the time when gold started being minted into coins, it had properties that were beneficial for this, ancient economy. In the same way that Bitcoin isn't regulated by a government or central authority, neither is gold. So it sort of supersedes that authority. Instead, it's valued based on the value that people attach to it, based on supply and demand. So if suddenly there were not a lot of gold to go around and demand remained constant, price of gold would go up. If there's a ton of gold and demand remained constant, then the price of gold would go down. There will only be 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined.
But it can be divided. You don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can buy,
Yeah, $1,000 is a lot of money.
You don't have to do it. You can buy $10 worth of Bitcoin.
Interesting.
So that gives a little bit more, freedom to somebody who wants to invest if they can't afford a full Bitcoin.
How safe is Bitcoin? You were telling me earlier that Bitcoin was not cracked during Mt. Gox.
We're still not entirely sure what happened, how it was compromised, but all Mt. Gox really was a place where people could exchange Bitcoins for regular money. And so people would give Mt. Gox their passwords to their Bitcoins, and Mt. Gox would help them find a buyer. So all someone had to do was break into Mt. Gox, get the passwords, and all of a sudden all those Bitcoins are gone. So what they did wrong was they had bad security.
It might also be interesting to state that a lot of people think that Bitcoin is completely anonymous. Like, it isn't actually true. Instead it's pseudo-anonymous. So let's say you get an email from some weird email address you've never seen before. You can see the Bitcoin address, you just don't know who it belongs to. But as soon as you do find out, as soon as we do find out, like Dr. Nick at, docdocs.com or whatever, then we know that's you, and any email that's come from that address, we know that's you.
Interesting.
So in a way, cash is still probably the best way, if someone were to want to commit crime, that's what they'd want to use, just because there's no blockchain, there's no record, there's no ledger when you use cash.
There's some other competitors for Bitcoin. You mentioned some names.
Feathercoin, there's like WorldCoin,
Dogecoin.
They're using Trump coin right now.
Bitcoin, while it was an amazing first stab at this, it has a lot of downsides. One is that the entire record for all transactions has to be hosted everywhere that uses Bitcoin. And that, as you can imagine by this point, is getting pretty large. It's tens of gigabytes of data that you have to host just to do a single Bitcoin transaction, because the rules say you have to have all transactions that have ever happened. The other problem is, in order to conduct a transaction using Bitcoin, it takes 10 minutes to actually verify the change of funds. And this is based on the idea that, Bitcoin blockchains extend in 10-minute increments. But there are a lot of things where you want your transaction verified a lot faster than 10 minutes. So a lot of these other currencies are attempting to solve that, and they're doing it with various degrees of success. A big thing that's sort of been tied with Bitcoin, and it's become a little nefarious because of this, is that it's been used for a lot of illegal activities. Most notably with the Silk Road, you're right. Silk Road was essentially like an Amazon for illegal things. So you could buy drugs and illegal weapons and all sorts of stuff on there. So it was a .onion website rather than .com, which means it can only be accessed via the Tor network, which is, once again, pseudo-anonymous, but a way to do things online without people knowing who you are. They were able to create a website where the buyers and the sellers were anonymous, and they paid anonymously through Bitcoin. And so it was very hard for the government to ultimately track this down. What governments really seem to have focused on this type of thing is you can't really control Bitcoin and you can't really control Tor. But what you can control is currency coming from Bitcoin back into the regular system. So if you want to have your Bitcoins and convert them to dollars, or if you want to convert them to anything else, you have to tap into the mainstream system.
Another really interesting thing that we're seeing nowadays is that Bitcoin's being used for remittance. So sending money from one country to another. Occasionally you have families, here in the United States that are sending money back to families abroad, and Bitcoin provides them with, the access, as well as, a way to transfer money quickly and relatively cheaply, across borders where the current banking system may not allow them, or if, their family abroad is unbanked, they might not have access to the institutions.
Is Bitcoin a solvent, viable alternative to regulated bank transactions? Or is good old-fashioned printed money still the best option for everyone? Whether Bitcoin is a financial fad or the future, this is a fascinating look into how technology can create and verify mathematical units which can be traded for value. And who knows, we may all be kicking ourselves years down the line by not buying Bitcoin while it was cheap. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dr. Nick. Please follow all of our social media over here, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see all of our great videos. We've got some great behind the scenes footage, and once again, as always, it's been a pleasure. You have been prescribed.